What if everything you thought you knew about the end of World War II was a carefully crafted lie? Beneath layers of history lies a chilling secret, hidden truths about Hitler's death that could rewrite the fate of millions. Tonight, we unlock a forbidden chapter, a box best left unopened, where betrayal, deception, and moral horror collide. Step closer, but beware. The story you're about to hear will haunt the shadows of history forever. The spring of 1942 was a time of dizzying ambition and creeping paranoia in Nazi Germany. As the war machine crushed across Eastern Europe and North Africa, one event, buried by decades of secrecy, changed the very course of the conflict: the death of Adolf Hitler. According to documents uncovered from the vaults of a defunct SS safehouse in Bavaria, Hitler's private Focke-Wulf FW-200 Condor crashed en route to the Wolf's Lair during a return from the Eastern Front on March 14, 1942. No survivors were reported. The official story announced Hitler had remained in Berlin due to a sudden illness. That was the cover. The truth was that the Reich had lost its leader. The SS inner circle panicked. Hermann Göring, Heinrich Himmler, and Joseph Goebbels met in the dead of night beneath the Reich Chancellery. The Nazi state was not just a regime, it was a cult centered on a single man. Announcing Hitler's death could shatter morale and invite Allied aggression. They needed a solution. They needed a ghost. Enter Operation Mirror, a black-budget initiative that had begun in 1939 as a contingency. Its purpose: to train a lookalike to serve as a body double in public appearances. The chosen man was August Waller, a failed Austrian actor, whose resemblance to Hitler was uncanny with makeup and mustache. For 3 years, Waller was schooled in Hitler's gestures, accent, paranoia, and even learned to mimic his half-blind left eye. He was never supposed to speak on camera. Now, he was to become the dictator himself. Waller was pulled from his safe house near Linz within hours of the crash. According to fictional post-war testimonies from his personal handler, SS Obersturmführer Klaus Ebner, Waller resisted. He screamed that he was an actor, not a monster. But the SS had rehearsed this scenario for years. He was told, play the part, or vanish. Within 72 hours, Waller stood before the Nazi high command, dressed in the Führer's uniform, barking orders in Hitler's signature cadence. The deception held. Waller addressed the nation via radio, where his pre-written speeches were laced with more bark than bite. Himmler and Goebbels pulled the strings. In internal memos, he was referred to only as the asset. But cracks began to show. Military decisions grew erratic. Waller, lacking Hitler's military instincts, deferred more to Himmler and pushed forward insane plans like Case Blue, the doomed drive to the Caucasus, and the disastrous siege of Stalingrad. Some generals whispered in closed rooms, "The Führer seems different, more desperate, more human." Waller, now months into the performance, began unraveling. He drank heavily, muttering his real name during mirror rehearsals. He wrote secret letters, none of which were mailed, and began to show compassion in private, demanding that certain Jewish prisoners be spared for the sake of morale, a bizarre contradiction to Nazi policy. His closest aides, who had known Hitler since the 1930s, noticed but were silenced, often reassigned to the Eastern Front or disappeared. In late 1943, Operation Valkyrie's original architects, including Klaus von Stauffenberg, suspected something stranger than tyranny. They believed Hitler had changed bodies. A plan was drawn to expose the doppelganger live on camera by referencing personal memories only the real Hitler would know. But before the broadcast, Stauffenberg's assistant was arrested, and the plot collapsed. The lookalike's identity was safe, for now. By 1944, Waller was a man consumed. He suffered breakdowns during briefings, openly contradicted past policies, and even asked one officer about his thoughts on the Treaty of Versailles, as though reliving pre-1933 history. Ebner recalled in a fictional diary that Waller would wake at night shouting the names of Jews from Vienna he'd known before the war. As D-Day struck and Allied forces tore through Western Europe, Waller begged to be allowed to flee. Goebbels refused. "The play ends when Berlin burns," he said. Waller attempted suicide twice but was forcibly revived. In the final days of April 1945, with Soviet tanks rolling through the capital, Waller was ordered to record a farewell broadcast. He slurred through it, eyes hollow. That same night, he was executed in the bunker, not by cyanide or pistol, but by a staged suicide orchestrated by the SS to preserve the illusion. His body, partially burned in the Reich Chancellery Garden, was misidentified by Soviet troops. Years later, rumors spread that the corpse lacked Hitler's signature dental bridge. The Soviets dismissed these anomalies as wartime confusion. But in 1972, a KGB defector in London revealed fragments of an internal file codenamed Operacja 10-Foot, Operation Shadow, confirming that Soviet analysts believed Hitler was replaced with a double sometime in 1942. This documentary reconstructs one of the most surreal secrets of the 20th century, the story of a man who impersonated the most hated figure in history, and in doing so, may have doomed the Reich with incompetence, fear, and a sliver of unintended humanity. Type next to continue to the next story. In the early 1940s, the race to harness the power of the atom was a battle not just of science, but of ideology and survival. The Manhattan Project, led by the United States, is well known. But what if the Soviets, working deep in the frozen wastes of Siberia, had beaten them to the finish line? By late 1943, Soviet physicists at the secret Kurchatov Institute had made a breakthrough. Unlike the fragmented efforts in the West, Stalin's scientists operated under relentless pressure and secrecy, fueled by a ruthless urgency to catch up. Despite shortages and sabotage, they managed to produce a crude but devastating atomic bomb, the Krasnaya Zvezda, the Red Star. April 1945 saw Europe in chaos. The Nazis were collapsing, Berlin surrounded by Soviet and Allied forces. Yet tensions between the USSR and its Western allies were simmering, largely hidden behind the veneer of cooperation. Stalin's impatience was growing. He saw an opportunity to end the war and assert Soviet dominance in one overwhelming strike. On April 18, 1945, a Soviet bomber departed from a remote airfield in western Russia carrying the first atomic bomb ever built on Soviet soil. Its target, the heart of Nazi Germany, Berlin. The city was unaware. Air raid sirens had grown faint and complacency had set in. The plane dropped the bomb over the Tiergarten district at dawn. The explosion obliterated much of central Berlin instantly. The blast radius extended for miles, incinerating government buildings, military headquarters, and countless civilians. The destruction was on a scale no conventional bombing could achieve, turning the capital into a radioactive wasteland. Survivors spoke of an eerie green glow and a silence that followed the blast. The shockwave rippled across the globe. Western leaders, stunned and horrified, demanded explanations. The U.S. government, still months away from testing their own device, scrambled to understand the implications. Winston Churchill, who had just resigned as British Prime Minister, warned of a new era of warfare that could end civilization itself. Stalin, broadcasting a defiant speech from Moscow, declared that the Soviet Union had delivered justice to fascism, and that the atomic bomb was a symbol of proletarian strength. He announced that the war was over for the USSR, though fighting continued elsewhere. However, the use of the bomb sparked immediate tensions with the Allies. The fragile alliance fractured overnight. In America, President Roosevelt's successor, Harry Truman, convened an emergency summit with British and Canadian leaders. The Soviets' first use of atomic weaponry was seen not only as a military strike, but as a warning. The trust between the West and USSR evaporated. Internally, Soviet scientists warned of the long-term dangers. Radiation sickness spread through Berlin's surviving population, with thousands suffering from burns, cancer, and genetic mutations. Yet, Stalin silenced any dissent. The use of the red bomb was presented as a necessary sacrifice for the greater good of humanity. In the weeks that followed, the Western Allies accelerated their own atomic projects, fearing that Soviet dominance would be cemented. The United States tested the Fat Man and Little Boy bombs only months later, but the shock of losing Berlin first left deep scars in the American psyche. Historians now speculate that the premature use of the Soviet bomb hastened the Cold War by at least 5 years. Rather than a post-war period of cooperation, the world plunged into nuclear brinkmanship almost immediately. Berlin's ruins became a symbol not of liberation, but of the dawn of the nuclear age's darkest chapter. This documentary traces the forgotten story of the Red Bomb, the first atomic weapon to change the course of history, and explores how this event reshaped international politics, warfare, and humanity's future in ways still felt today. Type Next to continue to the next story. By 1943, the Second World War had reached every corner of the globe. Europe and the Pacific were engulfed in flames, and the United States stood as a beacon of hope and industrial might for the Allied cause. But what if the war came to American soil, not via Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, but through the frozen forests of Canada? This is the untold tale of Operation Eisenklau, Iron Claw, the secret Nazi invasion of North America through Canada. It began with a conspiracy few knew existed. In the early years of the war, a faction of fascist sympathizers in Quebec, frustrated by their marginal status under Canadian rule, secretly allied with the Nazi regime. These groups, though small, had a network of informants, radio operators, and saboteurs who made the vast Canadian wilderness a perfect staging ground. In late 1942, German U-boats began covertly landing troops and supplies on Newfoundland's rugged shores under the cover of fog and storms. From these remote bases, Nazi forces infiltrated the sparsely populated regions of eastern Canada, moving silently through forests and over frozen rivers. Their goal was audacious: to carve a path south through Canada, over the border, and into the American heartland. With control of key railway lines and highways, they could disrupt the U.S. war effort from within, forcing a division of resources and morale. In the summer of 1943, Nazi units launched their assault from Quebec and Labrador, pushing into northern New York and Vermont. The American military, focused on Europe and the Pacific, was caught off guard. Early skirmishes in the Adirondacks and Green Mountains shocked local militia and government officials. But the fiercest fighting erupted in the Rockies. Colorado Springs became a crucial battleground. German armored divisions, ill-suited for mountain warfare, faced resistance unlike anything they had seen in Europe. Enter the Liberty Wolves, a ragtag militia of farmers, miners, former soldiers, and schoolteachers who banded together to defend their homes. The Liberty Wolves utilized guerrilla tactics, ambushing convoys, sabotaging bridges, and exploiting their intimate knowledge of the terrain. Their leader, fictional war veteran Sam O'Connor, became a legend among locals. Despite limited arms and training, their fierce resistance slowed the Nazi advance. Meanwhile, American and Canadian forces scrambled to send reinforcements north, but logistics proved difficult. Supply lines stretched thin, and winter was approaching rapidly. The Nazis, accustomed to blitzkrieg tactics on flat plains, struggled in the dense forests and snowbound passes. The Nazis attempted to recruit local disaffected communities, promising autonomy and protection. Yet, most Canadians and Americans rejected these overtures, viewing the invaders as foreign occupiers rather than liberators. As the harsh winter of 1943-44 set in, the Nazi campaign stalled. Starvation, frostbite, and guerrilla warfare took a heavy toll. By spring, the combined Allied forces launched a massive counteroffensive dubbed Operation Timberwolf. Using airborne troops and Canadian mountain divisions, they pushed the Nazis back across the border, reclaiming lost territory. The battle for the Rockies became a symbol of American resilience and the dangers of complacency during global conflict. Though little known in mainstream history, survivors' accounts and recovered documents reveal a dark chapter of World War II, where the war came home in frozen forests, and ordinary citizens fought a brutal fight against the unexpected enemy. Today, memorials in Colorado and Quebec quietly honor those who fell defending the continent from an invasion few imagined possible. The story of the Blitzkrieg on the Rockies remains a chilling reminder. Even the safest borders can be breached when the world is at war. Type Next to continue to the next story. In the autumn of 1944, Japan was a nation teetering on the brink. The Allied forces had taken Saipan, cutting off vital supply lines, and air raids on Tokyo grew more relentless by the day. Food shortages plagued cities, censorship tightened, and a suffocating silence fell over the once proud empire of the rising sun. Yet beneath the surface of loyalty and propaganda, a storm was brewing. The The seeds of rebellion sprouted at Keio University, one of Tokyo's most prestigious institutions. Here, students who once dreamed of academic careers found themselves facing starvation and conscription. Secret gatherings discussed forbidden ideas, democracy, constitutionalism, and an end to the war. The broadcasts of American radio, intercepted and listened to in hushed tones, inspired hope and defiance. On October 10, 1944, a clandestine meeting of student leaders evolved into a call to action. They reached out to disillusioned factory workers, intellectuals, and even some military officers who had grown weary of endless sacrifice. The movement, later called the Tokyo Uprising, aimed to overthrow the militarist government and the emperor's absolute rule. The first spark ignited on October 15, when protesters gathered outside the imperial palace. What began as chants for peace escalated as police forces fired into the crowd. Riots spread through Shinjuku and Ginza, with barricades erected and clashes erupting in the streets. Japanese soldiers faced a harrowing choice: obey orders to suppress the rebellion or join the people calling for change. Some units, notably the 1st Division stationed near the city center, defected, refusing to fire on civilians. A small but significant civil war erupted within Tokyo itself. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hirohito, confined to his palace, faced unprecedented pressure. Behind closed doors, his advisors debated whether to suppress the uprising with overwhelming force or negotiate a peaceful resolution. Publicly, the imperial household remained silent. Amidst the chaos, a clandestine council of rebel leaders drafted a provisional constitution. They envisioned a new Japan, a constitutional republic free from the shackles of militarism and censorship. Women were given a voice for the first time, and freedom of speech was promised. By November, the uprising controlled large sections of Tokyo. Battles raged between loyalist forces and rebels. Fires consumed historic districts, and the city was scarred by blood and smoke. International observers watched anxiously. American intelligence hoped the rebellion might weaken Japan's war effort, yet feared the possibility of further instability. Secret negotiations began between rebel leaders and American diplomats to coordinate a transition of power once Japan surrendered. On December 7, 1944, nearly 3 years after Pearl Harbor, the rebels declared a ceasefire and presented an ultimatum to the emperor: abdicate or face continued unrest. Behind the scenes, Hirohito agreed to abdicate in favor of his son, Crown Prince Akihito, who was seen as more progressive. The uprising ended with a fragile peace. Japan's new provisional government began dismantling militarist institutions and opening dialogue with the Allies. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were never carried out, as Japan's surrender came months earlier under this alternate timeline. The Tokyo Uprising remains a forgotten revolution, a story of courage in the face of tyranny, and a nation reclaiming its future from the ashes of war. Type next to continue to the next story. The bitter winter of 1942 in Stalingrad was not only a battlefield but a crucible of human endurance, loyalty, and despair. Among the thousands of soldiers trapped in the ruins of the city was General Friedrich Keller, a respected yet conflicted commander in the Wehrmacht's 6th Army. His story, hidden for decades, reveals a shocking twist: a German general who switched sides and helped lead the Soviet forces to victory. Keller's early career was marked by ambition and discipline. Born in Bavaria, he rose through the ranks with distinction during the early campaigns in Poland and France. He was known for his tactical acumen and a deep belief in Germany's destiny. But the invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, tested his ideals. As the months dragged on and the brutal winter set in, Keller's experiences in the Soviet Union changed him. He witnessed firsthand the horrors inflicted upon civilians and soldiers alike: mass executions, starvation, and needless slaughter. His faith in Nazi ideology eroded with every passing day. The Battle of Stalingrad, meant to be a swift victory, became a grueling siege. Keller's division found itself encircled, cut off from supplies and reinforcements. Morale was at an all-time low, and the line between life and death blurred. One night in December 1942, during a covert meeting with a Soviet partisan unit, Keller made a decision that would change everything. He defected. Risking execution, He slipped away from his command post under the cover of darkness and crossed enemy lines, surrendering to Soviet forces. What followed was unexpected. The Soviets, wary of traitors and spies, interrogated Keller extensively. But his detailed knowledge of German tactics, troop movements, and supply lines proved invaluable. Recognizing his potential, Soviet commanders assigned him as a liaison and strategist within the Red Army. Keller's defection was a severe blow to the Nazi command. Propaganda labeled him a traitor, a coward. Yet among Soviet troops, he became a symbol of hope that even within the enemy's ranks, humanity could be found. In early 1943, Keller helped orchestrate the Soviet counteroffensive known as Operation Uranus, which aimed to encircle and destroy the German Sixth Army. Using his intimate knowledge of German positions, Keller advised on weak points, potential escape routes, and enemy morale. The success of the Soviet offensive at Stalingrad was partly credited to this insider intelligence. Keller's influence grew, but so did suspicion. Stalin's inner circle, notorious for paranoia, debated whether Keller was a double agent or a genuine convert. Despite warnings and surveillance, Keller continued to serve with dedication. He forged bonds with Soviet officers and soldiers, many of whom had lost family to the Nazis. His transformation from enemy general to Soviet strategist was profound, and he was awarded a fictional Order of the Red Banner for his contributions. After the victory at Stalingrad, Keller helped plan further Soviet offensives, accelerating the collapse of the Eastern Front. Yet his past haunted him. Letters he wrote to his family in Germany were intercepted and censored. He was denounced as a traitor by his former comrades and was forced to live under an assumed identity in Moscow. Decades later, long after the war ended, documents surfaced revealing Keller's true story. Historians debated his legacy. Was he a traitor who abandoned his country, or a man who chose humanity over ideology? Some argued he was a symbol of redemption, proof that even in the darkest times, people could change. Keller's life ended quietly in 1965 in obscurity, far from the battlefields where he once fought. His name remains controversial, his story a haunting reminder that war is not only about nations and armies, but also about the choices individuals make when faced with impossible circumstances. The end. Now that the hidden truth has been unveiled, ask yourself, how much of history is shaped by the secrets kept in darkness? This is more than just a story about one man's death. It's a warning about the dangerous power of lies and silence. Some boxes should remain closed, but once opened, the echoes of their secrets never fade. Will you carry this burden, or let it slip back into shadow?